Okay, in today's lesson we're going to be talking about some various properties that are going to help us along the road. Now, I'm going to discuss what the properties are, kind of illustrate what they mean, and then you have part of the assignment where you just name what the property is. Okay, so we'll be discussing what they are. When you take a number times 1, any number like 3/4 times 1 is 3/4, 8 times 1 is 8, 9 times 1 is 9. When you times it by 1, you just end up with the original factor. Okay, before you multiply. That is known as the identity property of multiplication. Okay. Now, x plus 0 equals x. Okay, x plus 0 equals x. Now, when I add 0 and adding and multiplying to get where you started, you multiply by 1. Now, in addition, to get where you started, no matter if it's x or a number, for example, 3 plus 0 is 3, 5 plus 0 is 5, x plus 0 is going to be x. When we get back to where we start in addition, we're adding 0, and that's the identity property of addition. Okay, now this next property, 3 plus 5 equals 5 plus 3. That's true. That's 8 and 8. Okay, so really the only thing that changes from one side to the other is the order changes, but the value doesn't change. So when the order of addition changes, that's called the commutative property of addition. So when the order makes no difference at all, when it's the same on both sides, when they're equal, but the only thing that changes is the order, that's the commutative property of addition. Now, when we take a number times 1, we end up where we started, but when we take a number times -1, it changes the sign of the original factor to the opposite, okay? So it makes the product negative. It changes the sign, okay? What that known as is the multiplication rule of -1. Okay, now right here, these are equal because if you do the parentheses, that's 8, and then 8 plus 4 is 12. 7, 5 plus 7 is 12. So we have 12 on both sides, so they are equal. The only thing that has changed is where the parentheses are grouped. So when the parentheses grouping shifts, that's known as the associative property of addition. Okay. Now, the next problem is the same thing as this one, except now it's multiplication. Well, 8, and then 8 times 3 is 24. 12, 2 times 12 is 24. So they're equal, okay? So the only thing that's really changed is how the parentheses are grouped. So that's, again, the associative property, but this time it's of multiplication. None of these work with addition and subtraction, as I'll get to here after I do this next one. Now, just because there's a variable there, don't get freaked out. If x was 2, 5 times 2 and 2 times 5 are the same thing, okay? So, it's like this one. It's a commutative property, but instead of addition, it's multiplication. Commutative property of multiplication. Okay, now this one right here. When I take a number times 0, I get 0. Okay? Obviously, it doesn't matter the number you start with. Taking it, multiplying it by a factor of 0 takes the product to 0. That's called the multiplication property of 0. Okay, now I want to talk about the commutative property. Okay, all right. Plus and times it works, but subtract. There is no commutative property of subtraction because you see 6 minus 2 might be 4, but 2 minus 6 is -4, so it's not subtraction. And in division it doesn't apply because 10 divided by 2 is 5, but 2 divided by 10 is 0.2. Okay, now if you want to pause the video and do numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, go right ahead. You're naming the property that each statement illustrates. You have your notes here, for example. Okay. And then when you're done with 1 through 6, you want to resume the video so you can figure out how to do the rest of the assignment. Okay. Okay, now we're simplifying expressions, but there's a variable and we are not replacing the variable. Now we simplify the same way as we were evaluating the other day. There's just certain things we can't do with that variable in there. So we got parentheses, exponents, which you won't need exponents because there aren't any on this whole part. Multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. Now, before you start the process of going through this and simplifying it, you need to know what your operators are. So 2 and 5 is plus, 5 and x is times, x and 7 is plus. Okay. Now, the parentheses, I cannot figure out what comes out of there because I have x and I don't know what the value for x is. Okay, and I'm not going to allowed to put 1 in either. Okay, so we just leave that parentheses for now. Okay, now multiplication. Now there's multiplication right there, but since we don't know what x is, okay, we can't do the multiplication step. And then there is no division. Now addition. We have addition. Okay. What we need to do, though, we can't just add anything. The number that's multiplied by the variable, since 5 is the only term multiplied by a variable, we just drop that. And then to clean things up, we add the 2 values that are not multiplied by variables, the 2 and the 7. So 2 plus 7 is 9. Now, that's it. You can't add the 5 and the 9. The 5 is multiplied by x, but the 9 is not. Okay? Here's why. I'm going to illustrate this right here. By the way, write your answer as 5x plus 9. Now I'm going to show why you can't add those. Because if I have that as 5 times x plus 9, and let's say I accidentally added them, did the wrong thing, and put it down as 14 times x. Let's say I put a number in for x. Let's say 2. Don't write this down, just watch. So 5 times 2 is 10 plus 9 is 19. 14 times 2 is 28. Since they're not the same, that's why that cannot be done. Okay, so a number multiplied by x and a number not cannot be added. Okay, my next problem. 8 times 3 times x. Okay, again, no operation means it's multiplication. So again, the parentheses cannot be done. Okay, now multiplication. Well, yeah, multiplication with the 3 times x. Okay. We can't do that multiplication because we don't have the value for x. We just said that when we talked about the parentheses. Now, can you do this multiplication? The answer is yes. Okay, you can take 8 and multiply it by 3. Okay, you can multiply that outside factor to the inside factor that you know, and that would be 24 times x. Okay, so we need to write that answer as just 24x. Okay, this example here is kind of like this one. You got a plus, you got times, and then you have a plus. So parentheses, we can't figure out the parentheses. Multiplication, we cannot do that because that's the only place I have it and I don't know what x is. There's no division. Addition, now we have 2 addition signs, okay? But, okay, the addition step. The number that's multiplied by x can't be added to anything because it's the only term like it that's multiplied by x. These 2 values, the 8 and the 100, are not multiplied by x, so we're going to add those. 8 plus 100 is 108. So the answer is 3x plus 108. Okay, here, put in the operators. If you don't have them, you got multiplication. Parentheses, we can't figure what comes out of there. We don't know the b value. Okay. Multiplication. Well, we can't multiply by here, but we can multiply the outside. We just would multiply the 4 by the factor of 3. Okay, because it's 3 times b times 4. Remember, multiplication is commutative. We can multiply in any order. Therefore, it would make sense to multiply the 4 by the 3, and that would be 12 still times by b. So the answer is 12b. Next problem, parentheses. Well, we don't have to put that. We have a times and a times. We can't do anything about the parentheses. Now multiplication here, but you can't do 3 times x because we don't have the value for x. Okay, but this parentheses times 12 means I can multiply the 12 by the 3. 12 times 3 is 36. And then 36 still times by x, but we don't have the x value. So that's going to be 36x, okay? And of course on these problems there's no addition in sight. There's no addition or subtraction. Okay, next problem. We have plus, we have times, put in the operators, okay? And then plus, so then you can see what your operations are. You can't figure out the parentheses with the variable inside. Multiplication, we can't do the only place I have multiplication is 4 times x, okay? Can't do it. You don't know what x is. Now the addition, we have a couple of additions, but we can only do some of it. The 4 times x can't be added to anything. The 5 and the 6 can though, and that makes 11, so plus 11. Don't add the 4 and the 11. The 4 is multiplied by x, the 11's not, so they cannot be added. I cannot do that operation. So that's 4x plus 11. Okay, next problem. 8 times x times 4, so we have the operations in place. Parentheses, can't figure that out. Multiplication, you can't do x times 4, but you can multiply the 8 by the 4, okay? 8 by 4 would be 32 times x, and then that would end up being as 32x, okay? Okay, put in the operations. That's not a times dot, that's a decimal. When it's to the bottom right, times dot, I would put it in between. So we got multiplication, or not, excuse me, 2.3 is a number, then plus 3 times p plus 0.5. Okay, parentheses, you can't do anything about that. You don't know what the value for p is. Multiplication, can't do that. It's just right here, okay? It's not outside the parentheses like these are, okay? So division, can't do that. Addition, well, we got 2 addition signs, but we can only add certain things. A number that's multiplied by the variable just stays there. Now, if there was another number multiplied by p and it was adding, I'd be adding those, but that's the only value multiplied by p. It's called the coefficient there. Then we add our constants. The constants are the numbers not multiplied by variables. 2.3 plus 0.5 is 2.8. Okay, and that's done. We don't add those because that's multiplied. Never add a number multiplied by a variable and then one that's not multiplied by a variable. So it's 3p plus 2.8. Okay, we're doing the same thing on the next part. Okay, put in the operators. I'll put that. Alright, so now some of you might wonder, do we have to put a parentheses around the top? Well, there's no point because we can't figure it out because it's got variables. We're never going to be able to figure it out, so there's no point in putting it, okay? There's no exponents. Now there's multiplication, but I can't really multiply because 8 times a, we don't know what a is, and b, we don't know what b is, okay? So there's no multiplication. Now there is division now, okay? There is division. Now when dividing, we have 8 times a times b and then a. The a and the a can be divided because anything divided by itself, you know how 5 divided by 5 is 1, 6 divided by 6 is 1, 8 divided by 8 is 1. Well, a divided by a is going to be 1, okay? And when you have a multiplication by 1, it's the identity property, so we can take it out. So the answer is 8 times b. Now I don't need the fraction line anymore because I don't have anything on bottom. I crossed it out. Okay, it's gone. So 8 times b is 8b. Now, put in the operators. You got times, okay, and then divided by y. So there's no point in putting a parentheses. We're never going to be able to figure it out, okay, with the variables. Multiplication you have, but it's by variables, so we can't figure that out. Now division, you can do some simplifying because y divided by y is 1, okay? And then having a 1 factor, I can get rid of it because it doesn't change the product, okay? So it's 2.5, actually that's supposed to be 25, that's a dot right there. It's 25, that's a speck mark on the copy paper. 25 times x. Well, we just write that as 25x. Okay, next problem. put in the operators, times, okay? So there's no point in putting a parentheses around the numerator or the denominator because there's variables, okay? Multiplication, yeah, we have it, but it's with variables. Division, now you have division, and you can simplify the division because x divided by x would be 1, okay? So you can cross those out and put 1, but we don't need the 1 factor. So I have 8, but it's not 8 times y. See, the y is on the bottom, so the fraction has to stay there. It's 8 divided by y. It's not 8y, okay, because we still got that 8's the only thing we have on top, and we have the y, but the y is on the bottom, okay, so it's 8 divided by y, okay. 40 times a times b, and then 4 times a, okay. Now, parentheses, no, you could put them, but you're not going to be able to simplify them, okay? Multiplication, nope, you can't multiply because it's by variables. Division, you can. You can divide the 40 by the 4 and the a by the a. We know the a divided by the a is 1, and then 1's an irrelevant factor to have in a multiplication problem because it doesn't change the outcome. Now, we divide the 40 by the 4. 40 divided by 4 is 10, okay? So what we do is we take out the denominator completely and then cross out the 40 and put 10. So on top we have 10 times b. We don't have anything on the bottom, so there's no point in having the fraction anymore. There's nothing left on the bottom. So that's 10b. Okay, now if you want to pause the video and do numbers 7 through 18, be my guest. 7 through 18. 7 through 18. That's what I was just doing. Simplifying the expressions. Okay. Okay, now in the last part, you're going to tell whether the expressions are equivalent. Now, when you're telling whether they're equivalent, you're best off putting a number in for a variable. When you have to tell whether they're equivalent, that's the best thing you could do. So I'm just going to put a simple number in for my variable. A is the variable. I'm going to tell whether this is equal to this. And I'm going to put A equals 1. Just use 1 for the variable. So just cross out that and put 1 and 1. Now do the math. It's all plus. 3 plus 1 plus 10 is 14. 3 times 1 times 10 is 30. Obviously they're not the same, so we write not equivalent. Just write not equal if you want, okay, just to abbreviate it. Okay, 3 times x times 0. You still want to put the operator sign in, and then 1. So I don't have a variable there, and I'll put 1 in for x. Now it's not really going to matter what I put in for x because 3 times 1 times 0 is 0. So 0 and 1 are not equal. It's that easy, okay? Alright, 4m and then 4m times 1. Put in the operators. And then for the m variable, I'm just going to substitute 1. This just helps me tell whether they're equal. So 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 1 times 1 is 4. So those are equivalent, so just put equal. Okay, next one, put in the operators, times, and then minus, and then we just have 1. There is no operation, okay? I'm going to put 1 in for x. Now to solve this, we do the parentheses first to get 0, and then 1 times 0 is 0. So 0 and 1 are not equal, so not equivalent, so they're not equal. Now pi is going to be a variable, but you don't just put in whatever you want. Pi is always equal to 3.14, okay? Hey, just a second. Yeah, okay. So 8 minus 3 is 5, and then 5 times 3.14 is going to be 15.7, okay? Now if I take 3.14 plus 5, that's going to be 8.14. Those are obviously not equivalent, so not equal. Okay, now right here, x, again, you got 4, just put 1 in for the x, so x is out, 1's in, x is out, 1's in. So 4 plus 6 is 10, 10 plus 1 is 11, okay? 1 plus 10 is 11, so those are equivalent expressions. So equal. So to tell whether expressions are equivalent, just make up a number for the variable. Now this we have x and y, so I'll put 1 for x and 2 for y. Now you want to put in your operators before you start going to town. Okay, so x is 1, y is 2, and then x here is 1. Now, on top, 20, you can put a parentheses now because you can figure that out. 25 times 1 times 2 is 50, and 5 times 1 is 5. 50 divided by 5 would be 10. Now y is 2. 5 times 2 is 10. So those are equal. Okay, next problem. I just have x to worry about. X equals 1. Times, and then plus and minus, and then times. So 1. And I already have the parentheses there, but I'll put a parentheses here because I'm about to figure this out. 12 times 1 is 12. And then 2 plus 5 is 7, minus 5 is going to be 2. So 12 divided by 2 then is 6. Okay? And then if I put 1 in for x, 6 times 1 is going to be 6. So they are equal. Okay, next problem. 7p. That means 7 times p. And we're going to set p equal to 1, okay? Here we got plus and minus and then a square root, okay? And then 7 times p. So 1 and 1. So parentheses, parentheses. Because I can figure out these now that I'm replacing them with variables to determine whether the expressions are equivalent. So 7 times 1 is 7. Now here, you got to figure out the square root first. The square root of the number 4 is 2, okay? Now, 2 plus 1 is 3, minus 2 is 1, and then 7 divided by 1 is 7. And here 7 times 1 is 7, so those are equal.